In this video, we are going to be talking about double knitting. Double knitting is a technique where you knit 2 layers of knitting at the same time. So your front of your work will look like your chart. It will have, in my case, a pink gnome with a white background on the front. And when I flip it over, it will have a mirror image of my gnome, except the gnome will be in white and the background will be in pink. Both sides look really pretty. They're both really smooth. You can't see any floats being carried because all of the loops and carries and stuff are sandwiched in between the 2 layers of yarn. I love double knitting. I know that some people find it really intimidating and it can be time consuming, but if you practice it, you can actually get pretty quick. This is a double knitting chart. It looks like a normal chart, but in double knitting, each square in a chart represents a pair of stitches. You always knit the first stitch, and it belongs to the front of the fabric, the side of the fabric that's facing you. The second stitch in the pair is always purled in the opposite color from the knit stitch, and that purl stitch belongs to the back of the work, the side that's not facing you. And that is how you create the 2 layers of fabric. There are a lot of ways that you can do double knitting. Some people hold both yarns in their right hand and some people hold both yarns in their left hand. I have tried to do that. I get hopelessly twisted up and don't think my tension is as good. So in this video, I'll be showing you how I do it. And I personally hold 1 yarn in my right hand and 1 yarn in my left hand. If you can't knit with both hands, then you might want to find a different video where somebody holds their yarn in one hand. Like I said, if I did that, it would be really confusing because I can't do it very well. So there's a lot of videos online. Find one that works for you. There's also a lot of different edging techniques. I'll show you the one that I like to use. The thing that I believe I do differently than most people is how I think about my colors. On most double knitting projects, there will be some text about how on the right side of the work, this filled in stitch is your main color and then your background color, and on the back side of the work on even rows, then you swap those colors, and then it's opposite of that for the other kind of stitch, and it's really, really confusing. If that made no sense to you, it's because I kind of made it up. But point is there's some confusing text on double knitting patterns about gray stitches mean this on one side of the work and they mean the opposite on the other side of the work. And I have never thought about it that way. I simplified it, and as long as I swap colors at the end of my rows, it doesn't matter what color I'm holding. Instead of thinking about pink versus white, or whatever colors I happen to be using, I think about design color versus background color. The design color is the color the picture's made in. Gray stitches make the gnome. That's my design color. White stitches are the less interesting bits. Background color. I always hold the design color in my right hand no matter what. And I always hold the background color in my left hand no matter what. And as long as I swap those 2 yarns between my hands at the end of every row, it doesn't matter what color I'm holding. When I get to a design stitch color, I knit with my right hand first. And when I get to a background stitch color, I knit with my left hand first, which of course means that the purl is the other hand. So yeah, background stitch, knit with your left hand, purl with your right hand, design stitch, knit with your right hand, purl with your left hand. Don't care about the colors. It's a lot easier to do. So I'll just be knitting along, get to a gray stitch, use my right hand first. And that's how I've always done it. And I've gotten pretty quick at it. So I think it's helpful and it reduces how much you've got to think. So on my patterns, I always have the design stitches and then these dotted stitches. So you can see on both edges, I have a column of dots. Those dots represent a selvage stitch pair. That's just a pair of stitches that is exclusively used to make the edge look nice and to bind the 2 layers together. You don't count it as part of your work. So in this case, I have 48 pairs of stitches in my picture, and then I have 2 selvage stitches, which means for this pattern I would have to cast on 50 pairs of stitches. I'm not going to do that quite yet. I'm going to start with a chart that I drew with a big fat Sharpie. So the resolution is amazing. I'm going to cast on 10 stitches. For our square, we've got 8 plus 1 selvage stitch on both sides. So 8 plus 2 is 10. So casting on, you're going to tie a slip knot and leave a long enough tail to weave your ends in. You don't need an extra long tail, doesn't matter. Just enough to weave your ends in. You're going to look at the color of the first row. The color of the first row is your background color, and in our case it's going to be white. This is the only time you have to think about the colors because you're setting it up for the rest of your project. We're going to be doing a combination of long tail cast on and I guess reverse long tail cast on. I'm not actually sure what it's called. This is just what I do when I double knit. Whatever color your first row is, you want that color on the right. Okay? When you do long tail cast on, you have 4 strands of yarn. Number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. We're going to be working in pairs of 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So the color that you need to start with for your project is on the right. It's strands number 1 and 2. You're going to grab your needle and we're going to start with a reverse long tail cast on, which is when you scoop underneath number 1 and go over number 3 and pull 3 under 1. Just going to scoop that through. If you've done long tail cast on before, that should not be like, it should feel familiar. It will just be a little bit backwards to how you're used to thinking about it, because now we're going to do a regular long tail, which is when you go under 4 and over 2. I'm going to do that again. I'll try to move my hand so you can see it. I'm going to go under number 1 and over number 3 and pull 3 underneath number 1 and tighten it. And you're going to go under 4 and over 2 and pull 2 under 4 and tighten it. And you can see that I now have an alternating pink-white stitch pattern going on. You don't want to pull these stitches super tight. It will make it really hard later on. I'm going to do this 10 times. I've already done it 2 times. We're going to do it 8 more times. Under 1, over 3, tighten. Under 4, over 2, tighten. 1, 3, 4, 2. 1, 3, 4, 2. 1, 3, 4, 2. 1 and 3, 4 and 2. 1, 3, 4 and 2. I've kind of lost count. So we're going to count our stitches really quick. You're going to want to count in sets of 2, and you're going to ignore your slip stitch. So don't count that as a stitch. We're not going to use it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pairs on our needle. So we need to do 2 more. There's 1, and here is 2. Okay. Now, first row, we're going to flip this around. Pull both yarns out to the side. First row is your, we're going to work this way. We always work from the bottom right across. First row, our design color, the most interesting part is pink. So that's the color that we want to hold in our right hand. The non-interesting, boring background color is white. So we're going to hold the background color in our left hand and the design color in our right hand. In double knitting, You always knit the first stitch and you purl the second stitch. And because all of these stitches are in white, we're going to always knit with our left hand and purl with our right hand. So you insert your needle, both yarns being held to the back of your work. Insert the needle and knit, just that first stitch. Now we're going to bring both yarns to the front of the work and purl. Both yarns to the back of the work and knit. Both yarns to the front of the work and purl. That is it. You are double knitting. It's just a 1-by-1 rib pattern where you use one hand for the knit and one hand for purl. You're going to go back and use one hand for the knit and one hand for the purl. Go to the back, knit, bring both yarns to the front, and purl. The first row is usually the hardest row just because the cast on stitches might be a little bit snug. So don't give up after your first row. Do a few more rows and see if your tension evens out, and you might like it better. So we're going to do this all the way to the end of the row, to the last stitch. And remember on this first row that your slip knot does not count as a stitch, so don't count that. So we have one more stitch. Okay. Both yarns are in the back. This is my slip knot. It doesn't count. We're going to untie it in a minute. For your selvage edge, you're always going to hold both yarns in the back, slip the first stitch in that pair, and then whatever color of yarn matches that final stitch, you're going to bring it to the front of your work and slip that last stitch and pull it off the needle. Now on this first row you also have this slip knot that you're now just going to untie. We don't need it anymore. That was just to hold the yarn while we were casting on. Now when we flip the project around and turn our work, we're going to start by knitting this stitch, and now you can see that the yarn that matches it is in the back of the work all ready to go. We are also at this point going to swap the colors of our yarn. So on the previous row I was holding the white yarn in my left hand. Now I'm going to hold the pink yarn in my left hand. And this is why I don't have to think about what color I am using, because on this return row I'm just going to keep knitting with my left hand first and purling with my right hand, because all of the stitches in this row are white again, and my background color has swapped because I'm on the back side. But that doesn't matter. I don't have to think about that, because as long as I swap the colors in my hands, white stitches will always be left hand first. Doesn't matter. On the selvage stitch, we're at this dotted stitch right here. On the very first stitch, you're only going to have the one color of yarn in the back, and that is normal. That's how it should be. So you're going to knit the first stitch, bring it to the front, and now both of your yarns are in the front again, and you're going to purl that stitch, and then it's just double knitting as normal up until the last stitch in the row. So knit with your left hand first, bring both stitches to the front and purl with your right hand, knit with your left hand, purl with your right hand, knit with your left hand, purl with your right hand. And you're still just moving those two strands of yarn to the back and to the front. I usually don't hold my hands over a table so that my knitting needles hit the table. I'm sorry for that noise. Okay. We are now at the end of the row. We have one stitch left. This is now our selvage stitch. Both yarns to the back, slip the first one, and the color that matches the last stitch is white, so we're going to bring that to the front and slip the second one. That's it. We've now done the first 2 rows in our little project here. I'm going to cover these up with a ruler. Now, in this next row, we're going to be doing the color changes. So now we're working from this side to this side. I'm going to swap the colors in my hands. I'm now holding the white yarn in my left hand again, and I'm holding the pink yarn in my right hand. Selvage stitch, you're just going to knit the first one with the 1 yarn in the back, pull it to the front, and purl the second one. That's the dotted stitch. We are now going to do 2 white stitches. White means that we use our left hand first. So knit with the left hand, bring both yarns to the front, purl with the right hand. Both yarns to the back, knit with the left hand, both yarns to the front, purl with the right hand. That was my 2 white stitches. Now I have 4 dark stitches. What do dark stitches mean? Right hand first. That's all it means. So now I'm going to knit with my right hand with both yarns in the back, purl with my left hand with both yarns in the front. Knit with right, front, purl with left, back, right, left, right, left. There are my 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs of stitches. Now at the end of the row, we've got 2 more white stitches. White means left hand first, right hand second. Left hand first, right hand second. And now we're at our selvage stitch, which means that we slip the first one with both yarns in back. Whatever color is last, bring that color to the front and slip it. Okay, that is all that double knitting is. We're now going to flip the work around, swap the colors in our hands. So now pink is in my left hand. Doesn't matter what color as long as I swap the hands. And now we're going this way. So we're going to do 2 white, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, all the way across. Selvage stitch. You're just going to knit with the 1 yarn in the back, bring it to the front, purl with the yarn in the front. We start with 2 white stitches. White means left hand first, right hand second. Left hand first, right hand second. Okay, now we're to the 1 dark stitch. Dark stitch means right hand first, left hand second. Now we have 2 light stitches. Light means left hand first, right hand second, left hand first, right hand second. We have 1 dark stitch, which means right hand first, left hand second, and then we have 2 light stitches. Light and left happen to start with the same letter. Hopefully, that will work as long as your background color is the light color, but won't always work. If you are kind of new to doing knitting with 2 hands, it's really helpful to just do a whole 1-by-1 knitting project with your weak hand. So when I was first starting out double knitting, I actually did a couple of ribbing projects where I was really conscious to hold the yarn in my left hand so that I got more confident doing knits and purls back and forth. All right, now we're going back this way. Swap the colors. We're now going to hold the white yarn in my left hand, do my selvage stitch, Okay, we have 2 light stitches. Light stitch means left hand goes first. Left hand goes first. We have 1 dark stitch. You will notice that this row is exactly the same as the previous row on our pattern, so you don't actually need to count stitches in this row. You could just copy exactly the stitches in the previous row. Knit both yarns to the front, purl, both yarns to the back, knit, front, purl, back, knit, front, purl, back. Now we're at our selvage, so we're going to put both yarns in the back and slip, bring the matching color to the front and slip. Okay, you can start seeing our little square in the middle take shape. And now you don't actually really need to think about your background color or your design color, because you can see, well, this side's facing me. The interesting part's in white, so that must be my design color. Goes in my right hand. Background color is all this boring stuff around the outside. It's the pink color, goes in my left hand. Okay, we're now on the 2-4-2 selvage stitch. Knit that, bring it to the front and purl, bring it to the back. I'm going to do 2 of the left hand first stitches, the background stitches, and then we're going to do 4 of the light stitch. With the accompanying needle table taps. And this is all that double knitting is. Okay, put that up. We have 2 rows left, and then we'll do a cast off. So we're on this side now. My background color is clearly white, so I'm going to pick that one up with my left hand. Pick the other one up with my right hand. And this one is background all the way across, so now we don't have to do as much thinking. And I dropped a stitch there. There we go. Knit, purl, 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 knit, purl. Now, here's your little design. If you watched my video about whether or not you can knit and purl, or sorry, whether you can knit a crochet chart, if you remember, knits stitches are little rectangles, and so whatever pattern you do, if it's made in squares like this one is, your finished product will be shrunk. This is a perfect example. You can see that on my square chart, it's a square, but when I actually knit it, it's a little bit shrunk. That's because knit stitches are not squares, they're rectangles. If you didn't watch that video, I would recommend doing so because it's super helpful and informative. Okay, we have 1 row left. Background color is pink on the side that's facing us right now, so that color will be in my left hand. It's white stitches all the way across, so we're going to do left hand first all the way across. Now, on the last row of your project, I'm just going to speed through this one, you're going to do your selvage stitches a little bit differently. So we're to the back of the row. Now usually you'd slip the first stitch, which we're going to do right now. And you would usually bring the matching color of the last stitch to the front. But on your very last row, I want you to bring the non-matching color to the front. I don't know why this is, but I have found that if you cast off in the opposite colors from what you think you should, the project actually looks better. So let me tell you what I mean. Usually when you cast off, you would want to knit the white stitches in white and purl the pink stitches in pink. Makes logical sense, but for some reason when you cast off with two colors, it looks better if you do it the opposite way, which means you knit the white stitches with pink and you purl the pink stitches with white. You don't have to do it this way. You could cast off with all one color if you wanted, but I wanted to show you how to cast off with two colors because this is normally how I do it. So you're going to knit the first stitch with pink, not white, and purl the second stitch with white, not pink. And it's just a normal cast off, except you're still just doing your double knitting thing. And you're going to want to pull your cast off stitches a little bit snug. Because you're casting off 20 stitches for 10 columns, it can get a little bit wide and flared out if you don't pull your stitches tight enough. So you're just going to knit the knit stitches with your left hand. Bring the second stitch over the first stitch and make sure you give your ends a little bit of a tug to tighten that stitch up. Tighter than you probably think you should. On the purl stitches, you're going to bring both to the front, just like you're double knitting still, and purl that stitch with the color that you don't think you should. Cross it over and tighten it up. Both yarns are in the back. I'm going to knit this white stitch with the pink yarn, bring this stitch over. I'm actually really not good at casting off. This is my knitting weakness. Bring both yarns to the front, purl that pink stitch with the white, bring that over. You can kind of see that your cast off stitch from this side looks pretty white, and if you flip it around, your cast off stitch looks dominantly pink on this side. It will become more evident as I do more stitches. If you do it, see, the way that I just tried to, then for some reason the pink twists over to the white side, and the white twists over to the pink side. And I don't know why, I can't give you an explanation. I have just found personally that this looks the best, and so this is what I do. Like I said before, if you just wanted to do this cast off with one color, knitting and purling every other stitch with just pink or just white, that also works too. It will just be dominantly one color. So if that doesn't bother you, or if you don't mind it all being in one color, then it's probably easier to just handle one yarn. Pink. This kind of just makes a nice little cast off edge. White and the pink. front, purl, pull that over the top. Alright, and these last stitches, we don't care about the selvage anymore, so you're just going to treat them as if though they were normal stitches. Cast them off. And we've got a little square here. You can see that on this side, that cast off stitch looks pretty white, and on this side it looks pretty pink. If you don't rotate the colors, then all of these little bumps here, these dominant bumps, are white, not pink. So it's not the end of the world if you do it the other way. It will just look more like this stitch where one side looks really good and the other side looks mostly white as well, but I haven't figured out a better way to cast on. And you can see that my cast off edge is pretty tight. I pulled those decently snug. If you don't do that, your stitches will be really big and your cast off edge will be a little bit wider than your project, so it will flare out. And from here you just cut your ends and weave them in, just like you would for any normal project. But you can see that we have a white side with a pink rectangle and a pink side with a white rectangle. And it's 2 layers of fabric that you can kind of pull apart. But our little sides are nicely sealed together and it doesn't curl. And this is just a cute little double knit project. So the gnome square and the Pokemon squares are a little bit different when it comes to the selvage stitches because our whole edge is in the design color. Just based on the fact that we started our project with the design color as our base row, when we get to the edge of our selvage stitches in the project, when I slip that first stitch and then go to bring the color that matches my last stitch forward, these yarns don't cross because this color is in my left hand. So whenever the color that matches the last stitch in the row is in your left hand, you have to do a little tricky crossover to make sure that those yarns cross. Okay, so you're going to kind of drop, maybe not yet, you're going to want to bring, it's not hard, you're just going to want to bring the other color in your right hand over the top of that left hand color before you bring it forward and slip it to the next needle. So you still end up with 1 yarn at the front and 1 yarn at the back, and the one at the front matches the last stitch color, but the yarns have been twisted together. You don't need to do this when the yarn that needs to be brought forward is in your right hand, because when it's in your right hand, they automatically cross when you're holding the yarns in 2 different hands. It just happens naturally based on the position of your hands. But whenever the yarn that matches the last stitch is in your left hand, you have to do this tricky little crossover. If you don't, this is a screw up square I made earlier because I forgot to do this. I did it sometimes, and you can see sometimes my squares are connected, but where I forgot, there's these big gaps on the side, all the way down the side except where I remembered to do it, or did it accidentally maybe, I don't really know. So if you don't cross your colors over, this will happen. When you do it the right way, you can't pull the sides apart, they're completely connected together. Again, you only have to do it when the color that matches the last stitch is in your left hand. If it's in your right hand, like it was in our last little sample project, then don't worry about it. You're totally fine. Let's now swap videos to where I actually do this whole gnome in the color changes. Okay, so I've done the 4 rows, rows 4, 5, 6, and 7, which are all exactly the same. It's the 2 stitches on either end in the design color. Now before we do row 8, I want to talk about counting rows for a second. In color work knitting, not just double knitting, but also things like Fair Isle, the yarn that's currently on your needle is already worked in the colors of the row that you just worked. I don't know how to explain this very clearly, but when you count 4 rows, you have to count the colors on the needle currently that they're not showing yet. But when you release this row from the needle, when you work the next row, then it becomes visible. And so if you see here, I've worked 4 rows of the white so far, but you can only see 1, 2, 3, because the 4th is right here on the needle still. And so as you work your picture and you put it down and you come back after a break, don't rework the row that you just did just because you can't see it here yet. Hopefully that makes sense. As you're counting rows of colors, make sure that you count the current row on your needle, not just the ones that you can see the V's for. Okay, so we're now going to work 1 row with a couple of color changes, and after this you should be a professional double knitter and you just need to practice. So, oops, my design color, oh that is right, my design color is the white color, so that should be in my right hand because it matches the border that's facing me, and the background color is in my left hand, it's the pink. So we're in row, let's see, 8 if you're following along with the pattern. I'm sorry you can't see it better, but we're going to do the selvage stitch, 2 stitches in the first color, or in the design color, and then we're going to do 16 background color. So selvage, you just knit whatever it tells you to knit. Knit 1, bring both yarns to the front, and purl 1. Okay, 2 yarns in the design color. Design color means right hand. Right hand and right hand first. Okay, we're now going to do 16 of the white square, which means the left hand goes first. So that's all you're going to do is left hand first, which means right hand is second. Left hand first, right hand second. 3, 4, 14, 15, and 16. Okay, now we're in this part right here, so the bottom of the gnome's feet. So we're going to do 6 gray stitches. Gray means that the right hand goes first. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, now we're going to do 4 white stitches. White means that left hand goes first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're gonna do, let's see, that's 8 gray stitches. So now my right hand is going first again. 1, here's number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and number 8. Okay, for the rest of the row, it's just going to be the white stitches, the background color, until you get to the end, and then there's just those 2 edge stitches on the last couple. Okay, and let's go back and talk about that row counting again. You can see that you can't really identify the gnome's feet yet, even though we just worked them, because all we did in that row was release the 4th, like I call it the foundation row, the 4th pink, all solid pink row in the middle here from the needle down underneath the needle. So now if you count them, you can see the 4 V's that make up those 4 rows. But you won't be able to see the row that you just worked until you work the next row. So if I put this down and walked back, let's say tonight, if you forgot to mark the row that you just finished, make sure that you count the rows you can see, but then remember that you also worked an additional row that you can't see yet. And that way it will help you keep on track.